today, we're going to have a little fun. I'm going to have fun. I don't know about you guys. We're going to talk about period acting styles. And period acting styles is going back into history and looking at how people acted in other periods. It's part of our actor training, and an important part. Acting has changed over the years, and the way we train actors has changed. Remember, there is no school of acting, not until we get close to the 20th century. And as I said in the other class a while back, the way you learned acting in olden times was to watch actors act, to be an apprentice and watch actors act. Nowadays, of course, we can study in classes. So, we do know a lot, though, about the way people did act. And we'll go back first, just briefly, and talk about the ancient Greeks. I've already talked about this some. In ancient Greece, the characters were gods and heroes. They're bigger than life. They performed outdoors in theaters that maybe 3,000 people could come and see the play. It was large. And the acting style had to be bigger than life. We know that an actor would walk out on stage, and I know they would have to move very slowly and majestically. Gestures were big and they were slow. Mostly the actors just stood there and talked. The actor wore a mask, and the mask was huge. It covered the entire face and sometimes would go actually above their head and below their chin. Each mask represented a character. And no matter who did the play, if, say, there was a Medea, the Medea mask would always look the same in every production. And the audience would know from understanding their religion and understanding their history what these people looked like. So when Medea came out, they would know it was Medea. The mask would be Medea's. If there was a Creon, the same thing. If there was an Apollo or a Zeus, same thing. God masks were always looked the same, depending on which god it was. And so the audience knew that. They had this big mask on. They wore long robes. They had a headpiece on top of the mask that would go up maybe 3 or 4 feet. It was made to look like the head or a hat of some kind. And they walked on shoes made of cork, and they had big heels on them. They were elevated, which made them taller. So I couldn't move very fast or I'd fall down wearing these corked heels. So they walked very slowly. And they couldn't turn real fast or do a whole lot of movement or they'd lose their mask and their headpiece. So pretty much the costume dictated the movement. They talked very loud and very clear. Again, 3,000 people had to hear me. And they had no amplification. You would be bored if you saw that production. I mentioned this to you before. It was the most actors you probably would see in a production that time was 3. And that was only in Euripides' plays. When they first started, they only used 1 actor. and he played all the roles. And it was a he. The women did not act in the shows. And the way they changed character was the actor would just walk to the back, put on a different mask, and then come out as somebody else. And there would be a monologue. The chorus would come out and dance and sing while they were changing, and then they would come out and do another monologue. It's pretty boring. I think it's pretty boring stuff. I wouldn't get into it. Okay. Time marches on. By the time we get to the 1500s, the time of Shakespeare, the Elizabethan period, things begin to juice up just a little bit. In Shakespeare's time, the acting is still bigger than life, but it moves. The actors can now move. In fact, we know that in Shakespeare's time, they didn't really wear costumes. Each actor wore their own clothing. And if they wanted to look nice, they wore their nicest clothing. If they were doing something like Julius Caesar, they would wear their own clothing and maybe put a toga over it. But maybe not. They might just wear their own clothing. We know that the actors in Shakespeare's time were well trained with weapons. And of course, if you look at any Shakespearean play, almost all of them, you put sword fights in them. Why? These people regularly used swords. They knew how to sword fight. So there's a lot of fighting in the shows. The clothing of that time period dictates a lot about the show. We know, for example, the women wore pretty tight dresses. They wore a bodice, and they were laced up inside that bodice. And this was restrictive. It didn't allow them to move as easily as they would like. Now, did they use women on stage? No. None of Shakespeare's plays were ever performed with women playing the women's roles. They were all played by men. The women characters would be played by younger men. And they would dress up as women. It was thought improper for a woman to be on stage in this time period. And so when Shakespeare has a love scene, like Romeo and Juliet, we know they didn't do a whole lot of kissing. They kept it pretty simple. Why? Because some of the audience would be a little uncomfortable with two men making out on stage. But they did kiss. They did a lot of funny things in this period, and we study them in acting. For example, I'm going to get to this chair in just a minute. In the Elizabethan period, if two men met one another, and if they were of the same class, they wouldn't shake hands, but they clasped arms. Come here. I want to use you for a second. Stand up. We're greeting one another. This would be how they would shake hands. Oh, sir, good den.
Sorry.
No, you did fine.
Okay.
They would actually pat each other down. This is where the guy hug came from. Yeah, babe. Yeah, nice to meet you. Yeah. What they were doing, and the reason they clasped the arms, I'm getting into stuff I think is funny. The reason they'd clasp the arms and pat them down on the back is they were looking for weapons. These guys didn't trust one another. It was a time period when you had to be careful. I mean, we have brothers killing each other to be king. Didn't take anything for somebody, another enemy might want to take you out. So when they greeted each other, they were looking for knives hidden up the arm. That's why they clasped the arm. Wasn't being just friendly. It was clasping that arm. Yeah, there's nothing there. Nice to meet you. Yeah, he's good. Remember the movie Braveheart where he pulls out if you saw the movie Braveheart, he pulls out a ball and chain out of his back. Now, I thought that was pretty ridiculous. There's no way to hide a ball and chain down your shirt. But they did carry weapons hidden in their back. And so they'd pat them down. They'd shake their hands. If I were a noble, I wouldn't greet someone below me. It had to be somebody of my same level. They bowed and curtsied. The male bow in this period was pretty simple. If I was going to bow to someone, the foot would slide forward, and they'd bend on both knees. And they'd go straight down. And then they would open up their hand and drop the head. Why would I open up my hand? I'm not carrying a weapon. Good day, my lord. And then come back up. Now, if it was the Queen, Elizabethan time, you had to go all the way to the floor. Good day. And they would stay there until she let you up. Because she was the queen. Queens can do that. Little simple bow. Good day. They didn't bend much. Just a little bit. The women did the same thing. It was a curtsy. They would swing the leg forward, grab the dress, and curtsy, and back up. And they'd have to grab that dress. Why? Why would they pick up the dress a little bit? Yeah, so I won't step on it. So pick it up. That way you don't like put your foot on it and then step up and you rip your dress off. I mean, it's pretty practical. The women had this bodice on and they got all this stuff underneath it. So when they sat down in this period, they would have to, this is funny. It's funny to me. They would have to back into a chair. So when they came up to walk, they would walk in, go forward, and then slide back to their leg, touch the chair. Then they would lift up the back of their dress, and they had to sit straight up because the bodice wouldn't let them crunch. So they sat straight up right on the edge of the chair. And they couldn't cross their legs. There was none of that. It was straight. And then when they got to go back up again, if they hadn't moved their feet, they wouldn't step on their dress again. So that's why when they sat, they didn't move. Because there's a chance I get my foot on my dress and it all goes. And then it's an embarrassment. I have to lift up the back because if I don't and I sit down, the little hoops that are underneath will go like this. Woo, look at that, baby. And no lady showed her legs. Wouldn't let anyone see your legs during this period. The man, this is a sexist time. The man was everything. And the women had to be subservient to that. And it was really hard on Queen Elizabeth because of that. I mean, here she was running a country, and yet men thought they were better than her. She had a lot of problems with that. But we have some traditions here. I need a lady. I need a volunteer. Come here. I need a volunteer. The man led the lady. And it's called, if I ask you on the test, leading the lady. Real technical term. And what I would do if I was taking you to go down the street or if we were going to a ball or something, I would stand in front of her and put out the back of my hand. You would not grab it. You would put your fingers on top like that. And then I would lead her. And she would always stay behind me. Now, with this hand, I had my hand on my sword. That way, if a ruffian came out, I was ready to attack. There we go. I am the man, you know. Last I checked. Okay, so here I am. I'm leading the lady. Come up here. Come up here. Come here on stage. So they would do things like this. If she wanted to sit down, we'd come in. I'd take her past where we needed to go, and then it'd be like backing up the truck. Beep, 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 beep. She would go back, find it, and then sit. Yeah, there you go. And then when it was time to go again, and I would take her off wherever I wanted her to go. And we would lead the lady. If any of you been in a wedding? In a wedding, if the ushers bring you in, don't they come in and now they offer the arm? But the usher brings you down and then on the left, it goes back to this time period because they had to have their left side open so that they could get to their sword. And it ties right into that. You were so lovely as the lady. Thank you. I tell you. Yay! Yeah. Now, leading the lady. Now, if a man met a lady on the street and they were of the same class, they wouldn't shake hands. That wouldn't happen. They would bow and curtsy to one another. And if they were real friendly with each other, they would greet each other with the kiss of hospitality. That sounds like another good test question. The kiss of hospitality. Yeah. About what they were wearing. If you're wearing really nice clothes with a lot of lace on it, you're upper class. If you're dirty and look like you worked, you're lower class. The upper class didn't work, so they were always clean. The kiss of hospitality, and I'm not going to really kiss you. Okay. The kiss of hospitality, you guys probably see Hollywood starlets greet each other now. And they, oh dear, oh, mwah, mwah. When people say this, what I'm showing you is silly, we still do it. You'll see it at all the Hollywood premieres. Oh, mwah, mwah. You know, I loved your last film. Yes, I loved yours too. Let's go to Starbucks. I don't know where we're going. Okay, but the kiss of hospitality was done this way. We would greet one another. There would be a bow and a curtsy. Oh, lovely. Then I'd walk up to her. The man would put his hands up like this. The lady would put hers up the same, but on the inside. And then we would bend over like little Koopy dolls towards me. I'm not going to bite you. Mwah. And they would do a little kiss in front of each other. See, I told you lips were not going to touch. Okay, so here we go. We bow and curtsy. Good den. How art thou, cousin? Mwah. And it would be the kiss of hospitality. That was good. Didn't mean to embarrass you. That's coming. We're getting there. They did a lot of other fun things in the Elizabethan time. And a lot of it had to do with, again, how these people saw life. One of the reasons, like with leading the lady, they didn't hold hands, or one reason men didn't shake hands, those hands weren't clean. I don't know what hand you use to clean yourself with. And they didn't have toilet paper like we do. Now you're getting it. These were dirty people. They didn't believe in baths. They thought water, it was okay to drink if you mixed it with wine. They would always cut it with a little wine. They didn't understand why, but for some reason, if you drank the water by itself in London, you would get sick. Cut it with a little wine, you didn't get sick. Why? The wine killed the germs. They didn't know that, but they just knew that when you drank it with the wine, it didn't make you sick. Because their sewers and stuff just run right into the river. And that's where they get their water. Well, they also didn't know, so they wouldn't take baths unless they really had to. They got real dirty, they'd take a bath. But they didn't like taking baths. They thought it was unhealthy, make you sick. Well, yeah, the water was nasty, polluted. But they also wouldn't touch hands. And they wouldn't kiss a hand. In fact, it was considered bad manners for a man's lips to touch a lady's hands when they kissed it. So what they would do is they would offer their hand. She would put out her hand. I would offer the back of my hand too. And you would do just like she did with your fingers. And then I would kiss above the hand. If the lips touched, they would go, "Oh, how dreadful." They considered that an insult. But they would kiss above the hand. They'd kiss above it. They were, like I said, they were funny guys. They did some other funny things. We know that, excuse me, and I do stage combat, and it's funny about the British. The weapon of choice in this period was called a rapier. And they carried rapiers and they carried daggers. And the British loved the broadsword, which was back in the days of wearing lots of armor, big giant broadsword. And the Scottish loved the claymore, which is a big giant broadsword, a special Scottish sword. And it's funny, in the early part of the Elizabethan period, British gentlemen wouldn't carry rapiers, even though they'd been proved to be a better weapon, because they were so stuck in the tradition that their fathers carried broadswords, therefore they should carry broadswords. And finally, they quit doing it when they decided it didn't look good with their clothing. And then they changed and started carrying a lighter weapon. Different kind of period, different way of thinking about things. But when we study acting in this period, we cover a lot of these manners, a lot of their morals, because it helps us play the characters better, if we go back and to do Elizabethan play. So that's why I'm bringing all this stuff up to you. It's not just because I do like to talk about it, but it's part of that. Okay. Any questions about the Elizabethan stuff? I'm going to jump ahead a few years to the Restoration. The Restoration starts in 1660. And what happens in 1660 to start the Restoration? Does anybody know what event took place? You guys? Oh, okay. All right. Anybody know? Huh? Not the Crusade. It's long after that. In 1660, Charles II becomes King of England. It's a big deal because it's a restoration of the monarchy. For a number of years, the king had been kicked out by Oliver Cromwell. And England became extremely conservative under Cromwell's rule, because the Protestants that Cromwell led felt that humanity, and especially the royalty, had gone wrong, that everybody was way too liberal, and we had to get back to something very, very, very strict. And what Cromwell did is he outlawed theater. There was no theater in England. He outlawed dancing. There could be no dancing, so there was no parties. They tried to outlaw alcohol, but that was hard to do because everybody drank that anyway. They felt they needed that. And there were a lot of very, very strict conservative rules in England. Well, 1660 comes along. They kick out Cromwell. Charles II becomes king, and the country goes crazy. It went wild. They partied down. And Restoration period is, we're nowhere close to the wildness that went on during that period. Nowhere close. And one of the first things that Charles did was he reopened the theaters. He loved theater, and he reopened the theaters. And he also did something else that was extremely, extremely new. He allowed women to act on stage. For the first time, women can act on stage. And this changed the way people did plays. Because now you could have love scenes with a man and a woman. Woo! New stuff. One of the reasons that Charles II decided that women needed to act on stage is he had a girlfriend who was an actress. And her name was Nell Gwynn. Nell Gwynn. She was one of the first actresses in England at that time. Now, this will be fun. Nowadays, in terms of fashion, where do we get our fashion ideas from? Who dictates fashion? And it is dictated to you. You don't have a choice. Well, the Paris fashion shows. But who do they base a lot of their ideas on? What type of person? Celebrities. Absolutely. Movie stars, celebrities. Now we don't have just models. We have supermodels, right? And fashion designers work to design things for celebrities with celebrities in mind. This would look good on Johnny Depp. Let's create it. Denzel would look great in this. Let's create it. And then they sell that to the public. The public then goes, wow, I watch MTV and music stars are wearing these clothes. I think I would like to have something that looks like that. That's how the fashion industry works. In this day and time, the celebrity was the king or the queen. They dictated fashion. If a king or queen decided to wear something, everybody wanted to imitate the king or the queen. And this is in all countries. Wherever they had a monarchy, the king and the queen were the it person. That was who we wanted to go to in terms of designing fashion. All right, I'm going to show you a picture of Charles II. This is taken, photograph, no. This is from a wax museum. They took they took paintings of Charles II and made it 3D. And he looks something like this. Lots of lace, long curly hair, ribbons in his hair, feathers. He's got a little doggy. He's carrying a cane. The clothes are very pretty. Charles II. Once Charles II became king, and he came out wearing outfits like this, everybody wanted to look like Charles II. If you had money, this is who you wanted to look like. If you didn't have money, you wish you could get the clothes to look like this. "3D. See? That's old Charles. Now, Charles was the height of fashion. Everyone wanted to be like him. Everyone wanted to look like him. Now, he was married, but he had a lot of mistresses. And because he had a lot of mistresses, what did everybody else want? A lot of mistresses. It becomes part of the time period. All the wealthy people, all the royalty, it became this, they had this thing going on during the Restoration that I needed to get married. I would have children to my wife if I was a man. But on the side, I would have mistresses. And part of the fun of it would be keeping it a secret that I had mistresses. Women would get married. They'd try to find a good husband. They would have their husband's children. But on the side, they had guys that they would have affairs with. But they kept it a secret. Because if they found out about it, if it became public, then there would be a divorce. There would be problems. People might get killed in duels. And it was a game. It was a game that the wealthy people played. Now, I mentioned Nell Gwynn. Here's what Nell looked like.
Way too much fun with that wax ball.
Nope, that's what she looked like. You can look at, there are a lot of drawings of Nell Gwynn you can find. Now notice that she's revealing a lot on the top. That's part of the period. All ladies did. Part of wearing the corset was to help push up whatever you didn't have to make it look like you had more. It was just part of the fashion of the time. Hello, there's Nell Gwynn. I'm not going to give you 3D on that. It'd be too scary. Nell Gwynn. Nell Gwynn, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So, our men wear lots of lace. And the richer you were, the more lace you wanted. And we know that some of these guys had shirts made where the shirt would end and then there would be lace hooked to it. And the lace, if they were to take their hands and go down this way, the lace would like fall. So they couldn't put their hands down. So you'll see, if you go back and look at paintings, you'll understand what I'm talking about. The men would stand with their arms up like this so that the lace could just lay. And it was pretty. Why white lace? I don't work. If I don't work, I'm wealthy. If I work, I can't wear white lace. Therefore, I don't work. It was important in this period to own land, but you didn't want to live out in the farm. You had to have a city house too, because that's where the parties were. But owning land was important. They never worked it. The rich didn't work it, but they owned it. There they are. They're standing with their lace. They had this long hair, and men would come in and flick their heads so that they could flip it. And if they didn't have hair, they got wigs so that they could have the long curls like Charles II. And they would take lots of ribbons and they would tie them into their hair. And they would also have lots of silk clothing. Men would carry handkerchiefs. And they would have these long hankies. And the reason, there's a couple reasons for it, is these people, again, don't take baths. so they smelled bad. And men and women in this time period would make their own perfume. And it became your signature scent. So people would go out and collect flowers and herbs and crush them up and make a scent that they would put on themselves. Well, they would also put it on their lace, on their hanky. So if I got up next to somebody that smelled bad, I could just shake it around a little bit and I could smell my perfume. And I could deal with that. And then if I wanted to make sure somebody got my scent, I would, like that, babe. There's a smell. Here I am. Okay. Now, these people are flamboyant. Look at Charles's picture. He's flamboyant. We no longer do a little bow. Now, we swing the foot around. It's big. We swing the foot around. If the man wore a hat, he would take the hat off and he would swing it to his side, and they almost always wore hats. And they would turn the inside of the hat away from the person they were bowing to. It was considered rude to have the inside of the hat where the head fit face the person you were bowing to. And there's a reason for that. If I don't take baths, what happens to my hair? It's greasy. And the grease would be inside the hat. And rather than show that off, they just turn it away. So, we get this big swing of the leg. We get this big swing of the leg, and they would go way down. Now we're bending on the back foot, the front leg's straight. And then when I come back up, I put the hat back on. Men in this period did what was called making the leg, or to make a leg. I don't want to make you jealous, man. You see my legs. I know you guys won't be able to stand it. You ladies are going to faint. Sorry. You just have to deal with it. There we go. Now, if I were wealthy, I'd ride horses. If you ride horses, don't you build up your leg muscles? People who ride horses have real strong legs, real powerful leg muscles. And so it was important for a man in this period to have real strong leg muscles because they'd like to show them off, to show, again, that they're wealthy, that they ride horses. Even if they didn't know how to ride a horse, they want somebody to think they did. And that's part of this making the leg. The man would come into a room. He'd see a lady. They'd flex the calf muscle. Oh, you like that? There. Oh, I know you're drooling. There you go, baby. Look at me. I got my lace, I've got my hair, I'm flicking it, and I'm making the leg. Women will go crazy. We may laugh at them, we're no different. Guys go into bars now. Unbutton that shirt. Am I lying? Humans are so funny. But they made the leg. The man would make the leg. He would try to show off that muscle. Now the ladies in this period, they wanted to attract a man. So their breasts were hanging out, basically. After a while, that got old hat. You see that for long enough, you don't care. It's just out there all the time. They'd been going with low-cut dresses for about 100 years by this point. But what they would do is they would stand when a lady came into a room. they would show the inside of their arm. And if you'll look, they wear shirts that cut off. And they would show the inside of the arm. They would curve it just right and stand. And the idea was, this is the lightest part of your arm, of your body, that you could show. It got the less amount of sun. And if I don't have any tan, what don't I do? I don't work. I don't work. Look at that arm. And the guy would look at the arm and go, oh, she's a good catch. She's got money. She doesn't work. It's weird, isn't it? But it's true. They liked to keep that money. They wanted that money. That was real important. The ladies also, I love talking about this. Where did I do with it? Oh, there it is. My fan got broken. I'm sorry. Remember I said men carried hankies? Ladies carried fans. And they carried the fans for two reasons. One, they got hot. They wore a lot of clothing. And if they got hot, they had to cool down to keep from passing out. Also, if you're wearing a bodice that's really tight, it's hard to breathe. And they did. Women did pass out sometimes just from not being able to breathe. But the fan helped me get some air. Also, I would put my perfume on it. And I could send that perfume out. And if I got next to this stinky guy, oh, thank God, I could breathe. But they did what is now called fan language. The women did fan language. And it was secrets that they sent out using their fans. I'll give you, not all of it. I mean, it's pretty, there's a lot that you could learn with fan language. I'm going to give you some of the most known ones. For example, if a lady took her fan and touched her right cheek, it meant yes. If she touched her left cheek, it meant no. So if I were a lady and this cad over here hits on me and my husband's right there, I could go, how dare you? How dare you ask me out to meet you at the barn this evening behind the house at 8 o'clock? How dare you? My husband's right over there. I would never meet you at 8 o'clock behind the house. Never! At 8 o'clock behind the house. Never, never, never! And the husband goes, my wife's so faithful. Send them a message. If you didn't trust somebody, they touch their nose. So somebody, ladies or some man, you were in the bar and some man came up and gave you some lines, you could just look at him and go. Or if one of my friends started they protected each other. You know, you two girls are out on a night and this cad starts hitting on you and you seem to be interested and she looks over at you and what do you think? You go, don't trust him. Now be sending a signal. Now they wouldn't be open on this. I mean, it wouldn't be I'll look to the whole street and go like this. These were little signals that they would just send somebody on the sly. Or it wouldn't be, well, I need the fan. You just say it. If you pointed at your heart, it meant I love you. They would also do this to show love. They'd open the fan up. That way I could secretly meet with this cad over here. You. And my husband's in front of you, and I just go. And they could send messages that way. So the fan became very important. And in plays, when we do a restoration play, learning fan language is really important for the actresses to be able to play up all the messages that you need to send with that fan. Now, these people are all having affairs. I mean, they're getting it on. And they were pretty wild. And one of the things that happened in Europe during this period is that there was a wide spread of venereal disease, sexually transmitted diseases. Yeah. And I think this is really, really wild. Both men and women in this period would wear makeup. And the makeup they wore was very light. They wore, again, if I want to make it look like I don't have any sun, like I never go out and work, I put on a lighter base makeup, lighten up my skin a little bit. And they'd put on this light makeup, and then they would add their lipstick and their eye, and men wore it too. They'd eyeliner, the whole thing. And one of the things they like to do is they would paint on beauty marks, little moles. Sometimes they'd paint them like little hearts, sometimes clovers. They would do little bluebirds. They would paint little things on their face. Well, we know now that one of the things that they were painting, and the reason that some of these people would have a bunch of these little beauty marks on it, is every time they got like a syphilis sore on their mouth, they would cover it with makeup. Fun stuff. And they all thought it was pretty. Oh, how beautiful. She looks, got dots all over me. And beauty marks. And well, the beauty marks would continue on up into the 20th century. Women would paint on little beauty marks. They'd be in different places. But that's where it came from. They were hiding their sores on their face. Let me think. There's a couple other things I need to talk about. In this period, we also get the beginning of the aside, A-S-I-D-E, the aside. It's used in the plays a lot, in Restoration comedies. And again, an aside is a line given to the audience that the other characters pretend they don't hear. A line given to the audience that the other characters pretend they don't hear. So if I go over here, oh, Nell, my lovely Nell, taking her notes. Oh, I love you, Nell. I love you deeply. As long as she has money. I'll be with you forever until I can kill this bitch. They would throw out lines, little lines. And it's always the truth. The aside would be the truth. They could tell a lie to the other character, but they'd give the audience the truth. The aside. And that starts, we start seeing that here in the Restoration, and it would continue on through melodrama, and you'll still see it being used today. Okay. I was talking about swords earlier. In the Restoration period, they'd been using the rapier and dagger during the Elizabethan period, but they switch during this period, during the Restoration. They get rid of the rapier and dagger, and they go to a sword called a court sword. A court sword, like C-O-U-R-T, like basketball court. Court sword. And the court sword was real tiny. It was real short. And it didn't have a big blade on it. The blade was almost like just a point. And it was sharpened like a razor. The sword was just sharp as a razor. And the reason they used this court sword, again, I said they got rid of the broadsword because the rapier and dagger looked good with their clothing. Well, now, the rapier and dagger was too much for all this lace. So now I have a little bitty sword because it looks really good with my outfit. But it was deadly. It was a really deadly weapon because they sharpened it up so sharp that, and there are cases we've heard about in that time period where people would draw their sword, drop it, and it would cut their leg and they'd bleed to death before they could even fight. That's how sharp they kept it. And if you go back and you look at drawings, there's a lot of drawings of people fencing or dueling in this period. And instead of standing this way to duel, which modern fencers do, they stood this way. And it was to get as far away as I could from the other person's blade because they were so afraid of it. It was so sharp, the court sword. And the court sword would stay in favor up until George Washington's time. He actually carried a court sword because it's what a gentleman would have. Okay. I mentioned the makeup. The makeup in this period was lead-based. It's made of lead. They put lead in it. And it was real thick. And they would load that stuff on. It was real hard on older ladies, older men. They didn't want to show their wrinkles. So to not show their wrinkles, they would just put on deep layers of makeup so that their face would look smooth. And after a while, they started looking like a China doll, with a just total glossy face in front of them. And we now know they've gone back and people died long before they should have. And there's no, if they go back and read the records, there was nothing that should have made them sick. And they've discovered that a lot of these people died of lead poisoning because they'd put the makeup on and never take it off. And after a while, it just soaked into the skin and poisoned them, killed them. They didn't know that, but we now know that's one reason they died. But there's even lines in some of the plays. In one of the Restoration comedies, a character has a line, he says, "If she smiled, her face would crack." And what the reference is she's got so much makeup on that if the makeup would just crack and her whole face would fall apart. And it's just part of the period. Okay. Any questions about the Restoration? The plays themselves are very funny, the plays that come from this period. And what they tried to do with the plays in this period was make fun of themselves. A lot of these plays make fun of these customs. And that's why it's so fun for actors today to perform them, because what you're doing is you're being ridiculous with all these bows and curtsies and kisses and all the stuff that they're doing because they did them and they wrote them into the plays. They were really making fun of the wealthy landowners of the time for their just being silly in some of their ideas about life and how to dress and all that sort of stuff. They're very, very, very funny plays. Okay. That gets us up into the 19th century. In the 1800s, and I've talked about this before, I'm not going to spend a long time talking about it. It becomes the Romantic period. And in the Romantic period of art, we want to see life as we would like it to be, not as it is. We want to see life as we would like it to be, not as it is. And there were two predominant forms of theater in this period. They were, we just went over them, melodrama and heroic drama are the two predominant forms of theater. And they also went back and redid Shakespeare and older plays. But the new plays were melodrama or heroic drama. In melodrama, or song drama, as we call it, the acting was what we now call declamatory in style. Make sure I spell it right. Yeah. declamatory. There was a lot of emphasis on speaking loudly and clearly. They talked very, very loud and over-enunciated each word. They didn't try to be realistic. Again, we wanted to be bigger than life, better than life. In melodrama, you have a virtuous hero or heroine who is being persecuted by a villain. A virtuous hero or heroine who is being persecuted by a villain. And at the end, they are rescued, or everything works out fine. They win in the end. Good always wins. All melodramas have a really strong climax. It's huge. All important events happen on stage, not like the Greeks where we hear about it. They do it on stage. They talk about it on stage. And melodrama has a lot of spectacle in it. In other words, huge scenery, battles. I think I mentioned in here, I don't know if I did, one of the great melodramas of this time came from a novel, but it was put into play form right away. Uncle Tom's Cabin, one of the great melodramas. And if you go back and read about that play, at one point the leading character is being chased, and she decides she needs to cross a river. They would actually have a river on stage, and she would jump from ice floe to ice floe to get away from her pursuers. And it was huge. It was a big spectacle. And anyone who went to see that play expected to see that river. That would be there. That would be part of the show. Big spectacle. There's a lot of, in melodrama, if you see the plays, the characters often rely on disguise, especially the villains. They wear disguises. There's a lot of concealed identity. They don't want people to know who they are. And then it's finally revealed at the end. Usually there's comic relief. There's a character in a melodrama who is there just to be funny. And they're usually a sidekick to the hero. Okay, I'm going to get in trouble bringing this up again. In Star Wars, one of the great melodramas, if we look at 4, 5, and 6, which is actually the first 3 made, the ones with Han Solo in them, who's the comic sidekick? Just say it louder. Yeah, C3PO and R2D2 are the comic sidekicks. And if you watch, it's real heavy, something heavy's happening in it. Out they come and they do something really corny. And then off they go again. And then we get back into the story. And that's how all these melodramas were. Melodramas were really popular, extremely popular. And one of the reasons that they were so extremely popular is the characters in them tend to be common people. These aren't stories about kings and queens, usually. They may have kings and queens in them, but it's about being a person. It's about being a regular person. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to pick up from here next time, and we'll talk a little bit about actor training in the melodramatic period. See you then.